we're recording. So we're going to mix our alizarin crimson and our viridian. So just take a bit of your viridian, add a bit of water. This is a bit of an old tube I found in the back of the cupboard, but it's gone a little bit grainy, but it should be alright. And then we just pull a bit of the alizarin crimson in, and you'll see it will begin to change from this green to a red to a grey. And you can test that just on your paper. If it looks a little bit greeny, add a bit more red to it. If it looks too red, add a bit more grey. You can see it's quite strong. So we need a very thin mix of this grey initially. So I'm adding some more water to it. And we're just going to put down sort of like the background, slight tint of colour into the misty sky. So even that's a little bit, we're doing it landscape, we're doing two. So I'm just putting down a wash, just any old how, we're going to cover most of it up. This is onto dry paper. We don't want much colour in there. And we'll just do two. So it's not a big space that I'm covering, so I can just slap the paint on. So I've got two rectangles there. You can see the bits of red and the bits of green come through a little bit, which is quite nice. Just makes it look a little bit more interesting than just mixing up a Payne's grey and using that. So a little bit too strong there. Yeah. So this is just the background. If you look at your reference picture, you'll see that there's hardly any colour there. So we've just got this pale wash that we're putting on. If you've got a bit heavy, just get some colour, just get some clean water on your brush and just go over it again. I'm just going to pause it there. Right, so we've got our two backgrounds on. They've dried a little bit. So as I say, this is the background, so we want to put the midground and the foreground onto this. So if it's really, really dark, you'll have to go even darker and darker with your next layers. But I'm going to use the same colours again, so our viridian and our alizarin. But we want to go a little bit darker this time. And if it comes out a little bit greener or a little bit redder, that doesn't matter, but do test it just on the edge of your paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this section of tree in here. I'm going to use the flat brush, I'm using sort of like the corner of it. I'm just going to dab that in like that to suggest these trees here. Got a round brush, do it with a round brush, but try and get the sort of tree shapes that we've got.
I tried to get as light as possible, but...
Right, okay, we'll do another one next to it.
Right.
Do it much, much lighter this time. So we've just got a paler pale background. I'm just going to put a little bit where that tree is, and again I'm going to put a little bit where, if they're not in the same position, if they're a bit smaller, a bit bigger, it doesn't really matter for this. I'm just using that as a starting point, this picture. tubes because I wanted to talk about mixing it, because obviously with the pans it's a bit easier sometimes, but I haven't got a tube of yellow ochre, so I'm just going to use it out of my pans of colour. Really must clean my palette at some time. So yellow ochre, so it's sort of like a dirty yellow, and if you look at the picture again, we've got some bits of yellow ochre coming in just on the tree, so we'll put a little bit in there. Again, just drop it in. You could use your flat brush. I've got a round brush here, and we've got bits of yellow in this tree, and then also we've got some yellow just in the ground here. My paper's gone a bit bumpy, so just have to be a bit careful. In the distance as well, we've got a suggestion of some hills, so if you remember, as things go away from you, they lose their intensity of colour and they tend to go sort of a bluey grey colour, so I'm just going to put something in there, very pale, just in the distance, just behind the trees, just to suggest that. I've just used a little bit of purple. If you've got a little bit of purple on your palette, just the slightest touch of colour, just to put that into the distance going back there. Now you see these trees here, they've got a bit of a hard edge, and I want to soften that down a little bit. So again, it doesn't matter which brush, whether you use your smaller flat one or round one. Wash it, dry it, dab it off a little bit on your tissue, and then just soften the edge by just need a little bit more water. Just soften the edges here by just working into them with that brush. We don't want to add too much water. We're just trying to soften these edges a little bit. How are you all doing? All right. See how light it dries, can't you? So we need to keep building up that darkness. Right, I'll pause it there.